Brian, and hello all. I can't quite see you, but yeah, unfortunately I was supposed to be there in person. I was in Montreal for the weekend and I got stuck here, so, Montreal is usually the snowy place. New York is not the so snowy place, so go figure that one out. So yeah, thank you for the accommodation. Nonetheless, I'll get started with my talk now. So the title of my talk is Design But Make It Real, the Old Age Paradigm. So this talk is really about the resistance that we find in our day-to-day jobs as designers, and how these things are changing, with what's happening with AI and so on. I'm sure people will be talking about this in the bar afterwards, or you could join you. I'll go to the event next time, but I hope to fuel that conversation a bit or add some interesting stuff that I've been thinking about. All right, so to start, the sought-after ideal in software design. I would define this as one where all phases of the product, so conception, which is usually Figma, designs, the ideas part, then the production part, which is, we might be dealing with a UI framework or collaborating with the developer, and the usage, right? I have an extreme example here, but it's ultimately that usage surface in the ideal software design process is where all stages are indistinguishable from each other in terms of output. So I don't know what this would look like exactly, but I think as designers, it would be great if we could know for sure that the stuff that we're designing in Figma or Cursor or whatever tool we're using, if we could be completely sure that that's what the end user is seeing, right? And I think we know that there's a number of exceptions to that. The examples that I have on the screen here, especially this one for usage, is actually something that happened to me recently in a freelance job that I'm doing, where I got some feedback from a user, which is actually one of the founders, and I saw that he was using the app on an iPhone 13 mini, 38 font size with the open keyboard. He would send me the screenshots, and yeah, that was really interesting for me, but it would be great if, or rather in the ideal software design process, we would see that in Figma. So the way it actually works today is something more like this. I'm sure you guys have seen the meme. And when I say also today, I would say, this pre-AI, early AI, or in a scenario that's rapidly changing, is a process where it's very Figma heavy or ideas heavy at the beginning. Then we have what I would call like a translation layer, right? So where you collaborate with your developer, or you have to find a way to turn these ideas into code. And then at the very end, you have the usage layer, and these things loop into one another. So the old age question is, why does this happen? And I'm specifically referring to why do the ideas seem to degrade from Figma into production and into usage? I have two of many reasons here. So the first one is the handoff gap, right? So I think this is something that everyone in the audience is familiar with. This is a gap in the design or software development process that has been targeted by a number of products. I can think of things like Figma Dev, Zeppelin, or Envision prototyping tools. But yet everyone knows that this has been a band-aid, and they say this has been because I think this is the thing that's being targeted with AI in some way. And people don't know that it's a band-aid because it's just not a very good process nor experience. You end up relying on documentation, basically, so you have to over-document your design. Then you also have to rely on opinionated developers, which isn't sometimes for very good reasons, right? Some developers I've had to work with, I've learned a lot from. Some others, have been a little bit stubborn as to what can be done, but that becomes a very important point of the process. And then you also have to rely on things like browser exceptions if you're designing a web app, for example. And also sometimes heavy testing, right? So even before you ship this, there's quite a lot of internal testing depending on the product you work in. And I would say the one solution to streamlining this part of the process has been to learn front-end development, right? So people have been talking about designers learning to code for some time. And that's what I did some years back. For me, it was important to do both. But that also has its disadvantages. You can, like, in some jobs I've basically joined the engineering team and I've taken on more work. The quality of the output has improved. But the nature of the work has changed. Sometimes I haven't been able to spend as much time, let's say, developing initial ideas that may or may not make it to production. So it's one of the reasons this big handoff gap is one of the reasons why the software design process looks the way it looks like. Then the other one that I have here is what I call design specialization and creative work. So I believe that, let's say for the last 15, 20 years, since startups have really taken off, we've been encountering a lot of particular skills and some specialization and some work way before any product is shipped, right? So everyone in this room or in that room is probably familiar with, right? So you might collaborate with a graphic designer if you need some assets. Interaction designer is a title that I don't think people use anymore. You see it sometimes. Actually, I looked at a job posting by Bloomberg and they use it, right? So I don't really understand how that differs from UX design sometimes, right? Then some companies have a UX design person and a UI person, and then I even worked once at a place at an agency where they had someone called the production designer who added all the gloss at the end, right? And then you also have things, right, like having to deal with technical product manager, getting stakeholder buy-in, user testing, for which you need things like high-resolution prototypes, and then you might deal with the front-end developer. Then you might have to deal with a design system, that may not be up to date with the things that you want to ship. And then on top of that, you have the UI framework, and it turns out that maybe not all the data that you have in your design is available. So this is all work that happens before anything has been shipped. So this takes me really to the core of my talk here, which is that I believe that we've been operating under this model. And I'm going to say that organizationally, software companies have been operating with a very tight engineering constraint, right? So this graphic that you guys are looking at here is right from left to right, right? So from left it goes, as you see there, user feedback, insights research, that's distilled into design, user prototyping, user testing, and then eventually engineering is the throughput, right? So the company can only ship as much as its narrowest point. And what that has been for the last, I don't know, you can call it 15, 20, probably since, computer software really took off as a consumer product, has been engineering, right? And I think more and more, as I was saying in the previous slide, we've been adding work to this part of the funnel. I've worked at a number of organizations, and this is the pattern that I've seen. I have not worked at a huge organization, but when I did work at one that, let's say, around 100 people and where I was designing quite a lot of stuff, one thing that anecdotally, I felt like really made this evident was that a lot of the stuff that I was designing wasn't really shipping. And from talking to a lot of designers, I think this is something that a lot of people have experienced, and that's actually something that made me go more into the engineering part because I got tired of that. And so, this I must also say that this approach, looking at a company flowing through the constraint is based off the writings of this guy named Eliyahu M. Goldratt. And here I have a quote by Tiago Forte, paraphrasing him. Tiago Forte is a knowledge work, sort of like management, management science for knowledge work, and Eliyahu M. Goldratt wrote mostly about manufacturing. So Tiago translates that knowledge into knowledge work, which is what we do, right? And anyways, the quote reads like this: the only way to improve the overall performance of the system is to improve the capacity of its bottleneck. So this very much ties to what I was saying here, right? So you can only ship as much software as the width of this part of the process. And even though us as designers, may have, redesigned the whole portal, if we might have redesigned a lot of features, the percentage of those features or that work that makes the light of day is dependent on this constraint. All right, so this is where I will go into AI, because I think this is where things have gotten interesting with AI entering the picture. And what AI has done is it has made code cheaper and expanded the engineering surface. So I'll have a graphic for that. I think it's easier to show it here. So if to remember, so I'm going to jump back to the one before. So here you see the throughput is quite small here. Then you have very big inputs that get smaller, and then eventually come out the other way a little bit bigger than the constraint. And then here you have the constraint widening and also moving to the left. The constraint has widened, as I said, but it has also moved towards both sides. And I think this is where we have some interesting interaction with design. Because even though more throughput is possible, right? Like code is cheaper, each developer is shipping more code. That also means that where the funnel or where the constraint was expanded to, there's also now a requirement to put out code. And I think maybe a lot of people in the room are kind of quite see you there, so I'll ask you to raise your hand. But I use X to keep up with some industry news, and it seems like a lot of design teams across a number of companies, I think of Notion as the first one, have been quite public about designers shipping production code. What that really means, it could be a small line of CSS, fixing that button that the developers will never get to, fixing some typographic scale stuff, small things like that. But nonetheless, now that's what I mean by that surface expanding. And what this might mean is that also for the tooling, right, in terms of designers, it might be that for some part of our design work, we use things like Cursor, and part of using Cursor is that the developers are also using Cursor, right? So maybe we no longer need this handoff gap, right, which is over documenting our Figma files, but rather making prototypes, which is the way I worked at one of my last jobs. I made a fork of the app. I actually developed the features, and because the head of development didn't want me to push code in production, I don't know why, but done it many times before. Regardless, I would just basically hand off a fork of the app with a finished design, and they would integrate it. So under this new paradigm of widening constraint and a bigger coding surface, I believe that we as designers are in an interesting position. And this position makes us both empowered. Now, my favorite word, I think that just means that there's more ways to do the job, but also squeezed, right? I think there's a little bit of tension as to how we're going to keep doing our jobs. And I think there's also this expectation, where we need to upscale, right? There's an expectation for the job. Is the design output changing? Are we even still designing on Figma and making Figma files? Are we going to be the agents of change, right? So some people are talking about now that code is cheaper, we're going to get better designed products. And I wonder, are we going to take more of a developer role, or are we going to be replaced by engineers? I don't know, and I don't think anyone really knows what's happening there. So under this paradigm that I'm talking about, the widening constraint and the expansion of the coding surface, so new tensions arise, right? So just as I started the talk with those two tensions that we find are be which keep us from, taking that design and making it real. And sometimes I'm sure people in this room have given presentations where people really like the design, and then you get a directive from a high executive to just make it real, and that's when the work starts. So I think that never ends, but I just want to touch on a couple of new tensions that I think arise from this condition or this paradigm with AI, right? The first one here, craft versus speed. So I've seen a lot of people in the design community talk about craft as a differentiator. I use quotation marks here because frankly, I find it hard to know what they really mean. I think craft in something in say like ceramics or carpentry is seen as like someone who knows how to use your tools very, very well. I think maybe sometimes in design is used in product visual design is used as a skill to make something look very polished and highly detailed. And that's just something that is being thrown around a lot as to something that helps differentiate good designers from other designers. And I have mostly seen this applied to very niche products, right? So I don't know if people are very much following the design conversation on Twitter or X, but there's very clearly some products that are part of this design Twitter posting people, and I'll say that's something like granola, linear, maybe loom, right? So these are companies that are probably have very mature design departments have been able to get that design process that I showed at the beginning closer to that ideal, right? So getting more quality through the production process. And anyways, my point here is that there's a tension between this thing that we're talking about, craft, and the speed that comes from AI, right? And that's something that, like, I'm navigating the job market at the moment, and that's something that I find very confusing as to, if companies are asking for something that we're expecting, some things that are, very, very polished, very, very detailed, and yet people are talking about just how fast it is, how fast you can ship software with AI. It's like, which one do you really want, right? So that's a tension there that I find on a daily basis navigating the current design environment. Then the other tension that I've seen, maybe this one is not, I think it is a bit more development in terms of an idea, but is one of secure, scalable software versus personal apps, right? So people talk about how everyone is shipping apps in such a fast manner. The guy from OpenClaw says that he made the demo in like a day. And then what does that mean for things like security and reliability? There's also a push, I've seen it as well on Twitter, I guess on LinkedIn as well, where people say that, now that software is cheaper, code is cheaper, and it can be shipped faster, there will be software that fills specific niches. And I guess I just wonder, what that means if one of these companies is to get momentum, and how can you really scale that up into a proper business? And then the tension of that is with what is being referred to as the personal apps. I unfortunately couldn't find this one app I found. It was in the audience would know it, but there's one app that I saw about a month ago where you can make like a single-use app. So for example, if you run, you can download on your phone, and then you drag and drop basically design widgets that allow you to tap into your phone's speedometer, right? So if you run, you would have to use the Apple Fitness app, then you can just have your own little there. So again, as I said, this one is not so well developed, but I do think there's a tension there, between as designers, us basically making tools for consumers to make their own apps versus designing, this bigger, stronger more trustworthy apps that do maybe more specific things. And the last tension is the ease of use, well-designed stuff versus the slop. So I think with AI, there's a slop problem. By default, and then there's, I think slop can come out as both, or there's the output is widening, right? So you can say Sora is slop in video, in classic ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you're using. In text is very cheap to create a lot of text, so you could potentially clone something, right? Like I don't know if you guys have been on Claude, Notebook, very much the Reddit for AIs basically, but at some point it's basically unreadable. It's very hard to, there's a lot of posts all the time, and what I find to be the most useful feature there is the filtering, right? So I wonder, is there things like filters, are they gonna start providing, anti-AI filters or like levels in which you can qualify the AI output. And I also do wonder if us as designers will be the people turning this slop into refined products, right? So I do think slop is mostly present on social media. Like I recently wanted to buy something off Facebook Marketplace, and there was a lot of very believable scams that I think have been aided by AI. And even though this is at the level of the very big tech companies like Meta, I do wonder what AI is going to do to this, and what us as designers will create to help users navigate this new environment. So I'm just looking at my notes here. So one example of this is that one of my favorite browser extensions that I use to block actually some social media because I don't like looking at the feed sometimes, just got redesigned, and I have the feeling that the developer who made it redesigned it with AI defaults. I think Claude or whatever LLM just ran through it, and now it's like almost invisible. So I actually want to get in touch with him and see if I can design it. It's an interesting extension. So I do wonder as to how much like what slop in terms of very high output, very fast output, very, let's say, non-design output is going to can do for us as designers. Maybe there's more work for us because of that, right? Maybe we can just there's going to be all these companies that find product market fit first. They get some money to hire people, and hopefully they prioritize design, right? So as I said earlier in the talk, right, the constraint has widened, so let's see what that does for us. All right, so that's the last of my three new entrants in the field, in the profession. Just to close, a little bit speculative here, but I think what I was just thinking, during the talk is like what companies may be expecting now that people, it's easier to use to produce code and as I said before, now that the coding surface has widened. So one speculation is that companies may want to ship more underdeveloped MVPs that allow for much more thorough testing. That's actually something I did in my last job. I shipped something that I think design-wise could have been a lot more developed, but we really needed to get some feedback early on, and I did it with an engineer. I just did it all myself. Then touching back on craft, maybe you can allocate craft to features that are most conducive to revenue, right? So maybe this whole craft thing is only applied to things that are really grabbing people. Then maybe we also have more sophisticated A/B testing, right? So maybe you have two versions of a product that are very, very developed, like that not halfway, they can both be basically parallel, so people try out both. And then this one that I'm quite interested in, so I was a worker design engineer, is that design engineering becomes a euphemism for filling out the handoff gaps. So maybe when you see an ad for design engineering, and we see now very little for front-end development. I didn't mention this very much earlier, but I think if you look at job boards, they're like almost gone, right? So maybe design engineers becomes a euphemism to fill that gap. Maybe as designers we move more there, and now most developers are full stack, right? And the last one, which I think will help us in terms of shipping more design, is maybe companies will spend less time on tech debt. Maybe agents are very good for that, and that can include design dependencies, right? Things like updating, storybook updating, design UI frameworks like ChatCN or Prime or whatever you're using. So yeah, just a little bit of speculation there as to what companies might expect. I'm at 25 minutes now, so yeah, I'm done. I want to thank you all for being there. Fortunately, I'm not there with you, so it's hard to get a sense. And yeah, if you want to add me on LinkedIn, go ahead. I'm happy to continue this conversation. I am looking for a new job, so maybe there's some people in the audience looking to hire. I'm interested in talking, but yeah, thank you for listening to our talk.